Hey, what is going on, guys? So if you remember, not too long ago I did a magazine review here of the monthly Hobby Japan magazine. This was for April of 2021, the diorama technique issue. In here was not necessarily a diorama, but a build that I thought was super cool. It's a HD Gundam The Origin custom Zaku kit that's basically a mix of the Act Zaku and the high mobility type Zaku to basically making a high mobility type Act Zaku. And I really love this build, it's super cool, and so I wanted to make one by myself, and that's what we're going to do today. Should be pretty simple. So here I've got my Act Zaku and my Ortega's Use, a high mobility type Zaku 2 here. So it's basically just a mix of getting the two spike shoulder armor onto here and swapping the legs. So a real quick swap, and about 30 seconds later, there we have the main design of the build already done. That's all we need to do, and then just the He-Hawk itself, but there is some seam line removal that I'm going to have to do. The Act Zaku is quite interesting in that they designed the arms so that it has the same seam line as all the other Zaku 2s in the line. Unfortunately, it has a seam line right down the middle of the forearm, but they designed it for the Act Zaku in that they made it into a panel line so that you kind of have a panel line there as well, which I don't necessarily really like. But because it's just part of the design, I think I will go ahead and stick with that for the time being anyway. There are seam lines up on top of the shoulders, we'll have to get rid of those, and then there's some seam lines on the lower legs as well too that we'll have to get rid of. We do also have to switch the backpack as well, which is easy enough, just swap off the backpack, and the only problem here is then going to be that the hoses of the Act Zaku don't fit into the high mobility type backpack. Straight away they kind of go up and they're just kind of too long in general too. So we're just going to use some nippers and make a couple of tactical little snips, and basically how they designed the hoses on these kits is to have like kind of cuts in them for where you're supposed to bend it, so we can just add a couple more cuts to add another little bit of a bend in there in order to get this to fit up into there. I'll have to also cut off a little bit of the extra, but it should just fit just right into there. But after playing around with this a little bit, trying to figure out kind of like the best way to do that, actually I think I'm going to have a change of plans, and I'm going to go for replacing that with making my own tubing. So I've got some 1.5 millimeter rod, some 2 millimeter spring to go over that, and then some Kotobukiya pipe option parts here, because you only need to go like a centimeter length, so you just need a really short little cable hose to go between the side skirt and the backpack there. So just cut a couple pieces of the rod and then just bend it to form the shape. Then I need to just cut a piece of spring to fit over the top of that. Alright, so there we go. After just 10-15 minutes, easy enough. Get that sorted out. That looks much better, I think, so I'm just gonna go ahead and stick with that. The ones up here on the head, obviously I'm just gonna stick with those. Those are fine. There's probably some mold line on there that I'll need to sand away a little bit, but there's our new piping bit, and now we can just move on to just some seam line removal. For the shoulder, the problem with removing the seam line here is that these parts need to close around this part here on the shoulder. So if you guys have seen any of my past videos on removing seam lines, especially on HD The Origin kits, this one is going to be pretty simple. Basically, we're just going to cut out the side of this so that later, once the seam is removed on this, it'll just pop onto the side of there very simply and easily. So you want to cut here on the sides to make a gap for that, but you just want to be careful not to cut it too wide, because then it won't be a very good hold. You can very easily then just glue it later on, not really that big of a deal. So if you do end up cutting this section a little bit too wide, you know, it's not the end of the world. You can glue it later. Alright, cut out that section there like that. Easy enough. So yeah, I'll get some glue and remove the seam line on this. But then after that's removed and sanded, that just pops right back onto the shoulder here. Now the problem is this part kind of sinks down into there. There we go. So attached on there like that, and we're all good. So then for the legs is going to be the trickier part, I think. So once removed from the inner frame of the leg, these are the two sections that we need to glue together, basically the front and back, where you have a seam line a little bit here, and even more so here on this side right there. And I've removed the other kind of white parts and thruster bells, other parts that go around the outside of this, because this is the main section that needs to have the seam line removed. Now, it would be most easy to maybe just cut the pegs on here, and so that we can glue this together and then just slot this right back down into there. But the problem is that it's a little bit too wide, so we can kind of test the width of this. Let me just go ahead and put this back on the front of here. And if you see at the top, the inside of the dark blue part comes right flush against this kind of wall of the frame there, right there, where I'm coloring. So basically all this raised detail of like this piping bits and then going down here, those raised details, those are the parts that are going to be kind of in the way, but those are also going to be the parts that aren't going to show at all. So we can just go ahead and grind all that down. So all this raised detail here, we'll just go ahead and just grind all of that down so that this becomes just flat on both sides. Then later we can just slip that right into there like that. The other thing we'll need to do in order to do that is then also cut out the top of this section where those pegs normally fit straight into there. We need to make so they're going to drop down in from the top. So just basically the top part of this section of that we'll need to cut out so that the bottom part still remains, and that'll be let us know where like to stop sliding. But at least the top half of this we can go ahead and remove on the inside of the front and also on the inside of the back here. Also, this kind of wall right here is also going to be kind of blocking the way, and we can go ahead and cut that out as well too, because that's going to be covered up by this little piece here on the back of the leg. So once this is together, you can see that covers that up. So basically a lot of what's on the inside of here, which will give us a little bit more structural integrity, we can just go ahead and get rid of, so that we can actually get rid of our seam line and everything like that, and then everything should fit together perfectly fine after that. Okay, so after some cutting and sanding, I actually ended up cutting off the pegs here on the back of the leg as well too, and we're just going to just rely on these ones in the front. Also had to like kind of cut off the angle of this. This was like square, so I had to like round the angles of that, just slicing it off here on the front and the back as well too, just so that will go ahead and fit in here. So we can go ahead and remove our seam line on this piece, and then this will pop down, and then again these pegs here on the front will still slot down into the hole where they're supposed to go. They'll just fit down there, so you're gonna kind of wiggle that in there, and then that pops right down into place, and that's actually good, and it's actually totally secure in there like how it is. I will probably add some glue just to make that nice and secure up there where that's connected, but that is going to work just fine. So basically, in summary, just take this leg frame and just file and cut this down as much as you need in order to get this to slot down through the leg there into place. And that's kind of the quick and dirty, simple, easy way to do it. And also guys, in the spirit of waste not, want not, I thought might as well take the legs from the Act Zaku and put them onto the high mobility type Zaku here. I've also done a little bit mix and matching using a shoulder piece here from a Zaku 1 and also the thigh armor pieces from the WIP, and making a sort of test or like prototype Act Zaku, I guess we can call this. And also to switch the backpack there and gave it the Act Zaku's super cool machine gun there. So we'll also just go ahead and paint this guy up as well too to make a prototype Act Zaku. For the prototype Act Zaku, actually I decided to end up going with a different backpack. This one just because it just has the higher one set of holes on there, which are actually meant for attachment points for, this is a Zaku 1, so it doesn't actually have these hoses there. These are attachment points to attach the bazooka onto the backpack, but I'm going to make this hose go all the way up and into the side of the backpack up there. So I'm going to go ahead and replace these as well too, just the same method, just with some wire and a spring and using some of these pieces here from Kotobukiya for making some new hoses to go up around there. And the other thing too, for filling these holes, I'm going to do this for both of the kits. They have these holes on the skirt, on the sides, and on the back for attachment points here. I'm just going to go ahead and plug these up as well too by just using a piece of runner. Just go ahead and stick that in there and take your nippers and clip that off. I did this not too long ago with the Tamotu kit. If you guys remember that, I did like a video about that. And then I just need to sand that flat, and then I'm going to put a photo etch part on top of that. So I'll do that for all these holes to kind of fill and cover them up, so they don't just look like empty hole attachment points, but they'll actually look like a kind of detail on the kit instead.